Imagine you are a diver. The year is 1900. You're somewhere between the Greek island of Antikythera and the coast of Crete, and you're looking for sponges. Instead, you find the dead, a Roman shipwreck, at least 2,000 years old, and inside it, bronze statues, glassware, jewelry, coins, a treasure so vast the Greek government immediately sends a full salvage operation. But in May of 1902, a historian named Valerios Stais notices something the archaeologists had overlooked. A lump of corroded bronze, roughly the size of a shoebox, cracked open by time, by salt water, by 2 millennia of pressure and silence. Inside that lump, gears, not decorative gears, not symbolic gears, precision gears, interlocking, calculated, engineered gears. 37 of them surviving, possibly more than 70 original, cut with a degree of accuracy that wouldn't appear again in human civilization for 1,400 years. This is the Antikythera Mechanism. And the moment you truly understand what it is, and what it does, and when it was made, you will never think about ancient history the same way again. The established story of human technological progress is linear. We evolved slowly. We figured things out in sequence. Mesopotamia gave us writing. Rome gave us roads. The Renaissance gave us science. The Industrial Revolution gave us machines. That is the story we accept. That is the story that makes us feel safe. The Antikythera mechanism does not belong in that story. It was built somewhere around 100 to 150 BC, possibly earlier, at a time when the dominant technology of the Mediterranean world was the catapult and the aqueduct, when the most advanced calculating tool available to any human being was a counting board and a sharp mind. And yet, someone, somewhere, built a device that could predict solar eclipses, that could track the motions of 5 known planets, that could display the position of the sun and moon simultaneously, that could account for the irregular orbit of the moon, a phenomenon we call the anomaly of the moon, using a mathematical correction so sophisticated that the same pin and slot mechanism wouldn't be independently reinvented until the 14th century in European clockwork. This was not primitive. This was not decorative. This was not accidental. This was engineering, and it raises a question that serious scholars have spent over a century trying to answer and still cannot fully resolve. Who B14 built this? And what else did they build? Let's go deeper. In 1951, a British historian of science named Derek J. de Solla Price got his hands on the mechanism. Price was not a man given to romanticism. He was a physicist turned historian, trained to look at evidence without flinching. And what he found in those corroded bronze fragments changed his understanding of the ancient world permanently. He spent over 2 decades studying the device. In 1974, he published a 70-page analysis called Gears from the Greeks. His conclusion was stark. His words, not mine. The Antikythera mechanism was a calculator of astronomical positions, and it was more sophisticated than any instrument we know of for the next 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Let that settle. The Roman Empire rose and fell in that gap. The entire Byzantine era, the Islamic golden age of mathematics and astronomy. All of it. And none of it produced anything mechanically equivalent to what a craftsman made by hand from bronze before the birth of Julius Caesar. Price also noted something deeply unsettling. The mechanism showed no signs of being a prototype. There was no trial and error visible in its construction. No obvious mistakes corrected mid-build. It was refined, it was mature, it was the product of a tradition, not an invention. Which means there were earlier versions, precursors, a lineage of increasingly complex astronomical machines, stretching back into a past that left us almost nothing. We found the one that sank on a ship. What happened to the rest? The device itself is housed today in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. What remains of it is 3 major fragments and dozens of smaller ones. The exterior, if you could reconstruct it, would look something like a wooden box, about 34 centimeters wide, 18 centimeters tall. On the front, a large circular dial showing the Egyptian calendar and the Greek zodiac. On the back, 2 spiral dials, one tracking a 235-month Metonic cycle, a 19-year period after which the phases of the moon repeat on the same calendar dates. The other tracking a 223-month Saros cycle used to predict eclipses. And here is where we need to pause. Because a lot of documentaries describe these cycles and move on, they treat them like interesting astronomical footnotes. They are not footnotes. The Metonic cycle, to calculate it, to encode it mechanically, requires understanding the relationship between solar years and lunar months, with enough precision to account for the fact that they do not divide evenly. 19 solar years is almost exactly 235 lunar months. Almost. The difference is 2 hours. To build a machine that accounts for this, you need mathematics. You need observation records spanning generations. You need a theory of celestial motion that is fundamentally correct in its structure. The people who built this mechanism understood the sky the way a modern aerospace engineer understands orbital mechanics. Not in metaphor, not in myth, in calculation. And then there are the planets. Modern X-ray tomography of the fragments, conducted by the Antikythera Mechanism research project starting in 2005, revealed inscriptions on the interior plates that had been invisible for a century. Some of these inscriptions named celestial bodies: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Venus, Mercury. All 5 planets visible to the naked eye, all tracked, all calculated, all incorporated into a device you could hold in your hands. The researchers also found evidence that a separate front display, now lost, showed the positions of these planets on a circular dial representing the zodiac. This was not a clock. This was not a calendar. This was a working mechanical model of the known solar system. A planetarium, portable, functional, built 2,000 years before Copernicus. Now, this is the moment in most documentaries where the host offers you 2 possibilities: either aliens or lost civilization, and then you are left to pick. I am not going to do that, because neither answer is useful, and neither answer is honest. Here is the truth that is harder to accept and more interesting. We did this. Humans did this. And then we forgot how. That is the real mystery. Not that the mechanism exists. The existence is strange, yes? Shocking even. But the existence has an explanation. It was built by craftsmen in a tradition of Greek mathematical astronomy that we can partially trace. Scholars like Hipparchus of Nicaea, who lived in the 2nd century BC, developed the mathematical models of lunar and solar motion that are encoded in the mechanism's gears. There is a school of thought, well supported by current scholarship, that the mechanism originated in or near Rhodes, where Hipparchus worked, and where a tradition of sophisticated mechanical craft was documented by the Roman writer Cicero, who described seeing devices that displayed the motions of the sun and moon. Cicero described them. They existed. More than one. They were known. And then the Western Roman Empire collapsed. Libraries burned. Trade routes died. The craftsmen who knew how to cut those gears either died without passing on their knowledge, or passed it to students who did not survive, or worked in workshops that were sacked, looted, destroyed. We didn't lose the technology to aliens. We didn't lose it to catastrophe in a single moment. We lost it the way we lose most things, slowly, quietly, one workshop at a time, one dead craftsman at a time, one burning library at a time. The knowledge evaporated because the system that sustained it collapsed. And here is where the psychology becomes important. Human beings are extraordinarily bad at preserving things we consider obvious. The craftsmen who built devices like the Antikythera Mechanism were not academics writing treatises. They were engineers. They worked with their hands. Their knowledge lived in their hands, in apprenticeship, in demonstration. It was not written down in a form that survived. Because why would you write down how to do something that the people around you already know how to do? This is not unique to ancient Greece. We have lost technologies in recorded history. We have lost the formula for Roman concrete, a material that has proven more durable than anything we make today. We have partially rediscovered it in the last decade. We have lost the manufacturing process for Damascus steel, a blade material of extraordinary strength and flexibility that we still cannot fully replicate. We have lost the recipe for Greek fire, the incendiary weapon of the Byzantine navy, a substance that burned on water. These were not mystical secrets. They were industrial processes, lost not because they were suppressed, but because the social and economic structures that maintained them were destroyed. The Antikythera Mechanism is the most extreme example of this pattern, but it is the same pattern. And it forces a question that is genuinely uncomfortable for modern people who take technological progress for granted. If we collapsed right now, what would survive? In 500 years, what would an archaeologist excavating our ruins understand about what we could do? Would they find our servers and understand what they contained? Would they find our circuit boards and know how to read them? Would they find our satellites, decayed in orbit, and understand what they calculated? Or would they find fragments, corroded, incomplete, evidence of a capability that seemed, to their limited frame of reference, impossible? The Antikythera Mechanism is a mirror. That is what makes it disturbing, not its existence, its implications. In the years since the 2005 X-ray study, research has accelerated dramatically. A team from University College London, led by researcher Tony Freeth, published a landmark paper in 2021 in Scientific Reports. They proposed a complete reconstruction of the front planetary display, the portion that had been almost entirely lost. Using the surviving gear ratios, the surviving inscriptions, and the mathematical models available to Greek astronomers of the period, they built a computational model of what the full mechanism would have looked like and how it would have operated. Their conclusion: the front display used a system of interlocking circular dials called epicyclic gearing to model the irregular motions of the planets against the background of the zodiac. The same mathematical concept, epicycles, used by Ptolemy 2 centuries later to model planetary motion. Already mechanized, already in a box, already on a ship heading somewhere in 60 BC when the ship sank. The UCL team also built a physical reconstruction. You can find footage of it, a working model in brass of a machine that should not exist. And watching it move, watching those gears turn, watching the planets creep across their dials in mathematically correct orbits. It is not wonder you feel. It is something closer to grief. Because we are looking at what human intelligence is capable of when it is given time and support and curiosity and resources. We are looking at what was possible. And we are confronting the fact that it was possible, that it was achieved, and that it was then lost. For over 1,000 years, history is not a straight line ascending from primitive to advanced. History is something more honest and more brutal than that. Civilizations are not immortal. Knowledge is not automatically preserved. Progress is not guaranteed. The Antikythera Mechanism sat at the bottom of the Aegean Sea for 2,000 years because it was on a ship that sank. That is all. A storm, a navigational error, an accident of weather. And the most sophisticated mechanical device of the ancient world was erased from human consciousness for 2 millennia. How many other devices like it went down with other ships? How many burned in libraries? How many corroded in workshops where the last craftsman died without an apprentice? We will never know. That is not a rhetorical flourish. That is simply true. We will never know. What we know is this: in the 2nd century BC, somewhere in the Greek-speaking world, a human being with extraordinary skill and mathematical sophistication built a machine that modeled the cosmos, a machine that tracked time across multiple overlapping cycles, a machine that predicted eclipses, a machine that showed you where every planet visible to the naked eye was located on any date you chose to input. A machine that was, in every meaningful sense, a computer. Not a digital computer, not a silicon computer, a mechanical analog computer. One whose software was written not in code, but in bronze, in the precise geometry of interlocking gears, in the mathematical elegance of pin and slot mechanisms that corrected for the moon's anomalous orbit. The word computer, before it meant a machine, meant a person, a human being whose job was to compute, to calculate, to take in data and produce an output. The Antikythera Mechanism replaced that person. 2,000 years ago, someone somewhere decided that the calculation was too important, too complex, too valuable to leave to human memory and human error, and they built a machine to do it instead. That decision, that impulse, that engineering philosophy is the same impulse that produced every calculating machine that followed. the same impulse that produced the first mechanical clocks of medieval Europe. The difference engine of Charles Babbage, the ENIAC, the device you are using right now to watch this video. The lineage is broken. The knowledge did not pass forward in an unbroken chain, but the impulse did. The need did. Because the sky does not change, the moon still behaves anomalously. Eclipses still arrive on schedule, and human beings still want to know when. So here is where I leave you. The Antikythera Mechanism is real. It is in a museum in Athens. You can go and see it. It has been studied by physicists, historians, mathematicians, and engineers for over a century. Its capabilities are documented. Its gear ratios are calculated. Its inscriptions are translated. It is not a mystery in the sense of being unexplained. It is a mystery in the deeper sense, in the sense that asks what else we don't know. What else is sitting, corroded and unrecognized, in a museum somewhere? What else went down with a ship we haven't found? What other traditions of knowledge, what other workshops, what other craftsmen existed in the ancient world and left us nothing but silence? The history of human technology is not a complete document. It is a fragment. It is a corroded lump of bronze that, when you finally crack it open, turns out to contain something extraordinary. Something that was always there, waiting for someone to look closely enough.